who spreads nothing but cowardice. He might have been a good scholar in the past, but nowadays he is clearly under the influence of that heretic Shams. At a time when the enemies of Islam are looming large, what does Rumi preach? Peace, passivity, submission. Brother, stand the pain. Escape the poison of your impulses. The sky will bow to your beauty. If you do, that way a thorn expands to a rose. A particular glows with the universal. Rumi preaches submissiveness, turning Muslims into a flock of sheep, meek and timid. He says for every prophet there is a community of followers, and for every community there is an appointed time. Other than love, his favorite words seem to be patience, balance, and tolerance. If it were up to him, we would all just sit in our houses and wait to be slaughtered by our enemies or be stricken by some other calamity. And I am sure he would then come and briefly examine the wreck, calling it barakah. There are people who have heard him say, when school and mosque and minaret get torn down, then dervishes can begin their community. Now, what kind of talk is that? And when you come to think of it, the only reason Rumi ended up in this city is that decades ago his family left Afghanistan seeking refuge in Anatolia. Many other powerful and wealthy people at the time had received an open invitation from the Sultan of Seljuks, among them Rumi's father. Thus sheltered and privileged and always showered with attention and approval, Rumi's family left the bedlam of Afghanistan for the tranquil orchards of Konya. It's easy to preach tolerance when you have a history like that. The other day I heard a story that Shams of Tabriz told a group of people in the bazaar. He said that Ali, the Prophet's successor and companion, was fighting with an infidel on a battlefield. Ali was about to thrust his sword into the other man's heart when all of a sudden the infidel raised his head and spit at him. Ali immediately dropped his sword, took a deep breath, and walked away. The infidel was stunned. He ran after Ali and asked him why he was letting him go. "Because I'm very angry at you," said Ali. "Then why don't you kill me?" the infidel asked. "I don't understand." Ali explained, "When you spit in my face, I got very angry. My ego was provoked, yearning for revenge. If I kill you now, I'll be following my ego. And that would be a huge mistake." So Ali set the man free. The infidel was so touched that he became Ali's friend and follower, and in time he converted to Islam of his own free will. This, apparently, is the kind of story Shams of Tabriz likes to tell. And what is his message? Let the infidels spit in your face. I say, over my dead body. Infidel or not, nobody can spit in the face of Baibars the warrior. Ella. Northampton, June 13, 2008. Beloved Aziz, you're going to think I'm crazy, but there's something I've been meaning to ask you. Are you Shams or is it the other way round? Is Shams you? Yours sincerely, Ella. Dear Ella, Shams is the person who was responsible for the transformation of Rumi from a local cleric to a world-famous poet and mystic. Master Samid used to say to me, even if there might be a Shams equivalent in some people, what matters is, where are they? Rumi's to see it. Warm regards, Aziz. Dear Aziz, who is Master Samid best? Ella. Beloved Ella, it's a long story. Do you really want to know? Warmly, Aziz. Dear Aziz, I have plenty of time. Love, Ella. Rumi. Konya, August 2, 1245. Bountiful is your life, full and complete. Or so you think, until someone comes along and makes you realize what you have been missing all this time. Like a mirror that reflects what is absent rather than present, he shows you the void in your soul, the void you have resisted seeing. That person can be a lover, a friend, or a spiritual master. Sometimes it can be a child to look after. What matters is to find the soul that will complete yours. All the prophets have given the same advice: find the one who will be your mirror. For me that mirror is Shams of Tabriz. Until he came and forced me to look deep into the crannies of my soul, I had not faced the fundamental truth about myself, that though successful and prosperous outside, I was lonely and unfulfilled inside. It's as if for years on end you compile a personal dictionary. In it you give your definition of every concept that matters to you, such as truth, happiness, or beauty. At every major turning point in life, you refer to this dictionary, hardly ever feeling the need to question its premises. Then one day a stranger comes and snatches your precious dictionary and throws it away. All your definitions need to be redefined, he says. It's time for you to unlearn everything you know. And you, for some reason unbeknownst to your mind but obvious to your heart, instead of raising objections or getting cross with him, gladly comply. This is what Shams has done to me. Our friendship has taught me so much. But more than that, he has taught me to unlearn everything I knew. When you love someone this much, you expect everyone around you to feel the same way, sharing your joy and euphoria. And when that doesn't happen, you feel surprised, then offended, and betrayed. How could I possibly make my family and friends see what I see? How could I describe the indescribable Shams as my sea of mercy and grace? He is my sun of truth and faith. I call him the King of Kings of Spirit. He is my fountain of life and my tall cypress tree, majestic and evergreen. His companionship is like the fourth reading of the Quran, a journey that can only be experienced from within but never grasped from the outside. Unfortunately, most people make their evaluations based on images and hearsay. To them Shams is an eccentric dervish. They think he behaves bizarrely and speaks blasphemy, that he is utterly unpredictable and unreliable. To me, however, he is the epitome of love that moves the whole universe, at times retreating into the background and holding every piece together, at times exploding in bursts. An encounter of this kind happens once in a lifetime. Once in 38 years. Ever since Shams came into our lives, people have been asking me what it is in him that I find so special. But there is no way I can answer them. At the end of the day, those who ask this question are the ones who won't understand it, and as for those who do understand, they don't ask such things. The quandary I find myself in reminds me of the story of Layla and Harun ar-Rashid, the famous Abbasid emperor. Upon hearing that a Bedouin poet named Qays had fallen hopelessly in love with Layla and lost his mind for her, and was therefore named Majnun the madman, the emperor became very curious about the woman who had caused such misery. This Layla must be a very special creature, he thought. A woman far superior to all other women. Perhaps she is an enchantress unequaled in beauty and charm. Excited, intrigued, he played every trick in the book to find a way to see Layla with his own eyes. Finally one day they brought Layla to the emperor's palace. When she took off her veil, Harun ar-Rashid was disillusioned. Not that Layla was ugly, crippled, or old. But she wasn't extraordinarily attractive either. She was a human being with ordinary human needs and several defects, a simple woman, like countless others. The emperor did not hide his disappointment. Are you the one Majnun has been crazy about? Why, you look so ordinary. What is so special about you? Layla broke into a smile. Yes, I am Layla. But you are not Majnun, she answered. You have to see me with the eyes of Majnun. Otherwise you could never solve this mystery called love. How can I explain the same mystery to my family, friends, or students? How can I make them understand that for them to grasp what is so special about Shams of Tabriz, they have to start looking at him with the eyes of Majnun? Is there a way to grasp what love means without becoming a lover? First, love cannot be explained. It can only be experienced. Love cannot be explained, yet it explains all. Kaimaya. Kanya, August 17, 12:45. Breathlessly I wait for a summons, but Rumi doesn't have time to study with me anymore. As much as I miss our lessons and feel neglected, I am not upset with him. Maybe it's because I love Rumi too much to get cross with him. Or maybe it's because I can understand better than anyone else how he feels, for deep inside I, too, am swept up by the bewildering current that is Shams of Tabriz. Rumi's eyes follow Shams the way a sunflower follows the sun. Their love for each other is so visible and intense, and what they have is so rare, that one can't help feeling despondent around them, seized by the realization that a bond of such magnitude is missing in one's own life. Not everyone in the house can tolerate this, starting with Aladdin. So many times I've caught him looking daggers at Shams. Kara, too, is ill at ease, but she never says anything and I never ask. We are all sitting on a powder keg. Strangely, Shams of Tabriz, the man who is responsible for all the tension, either is unaware of the situation or simply doesn't care. Part of me is bitter at Shams for taking Rumi away from us. Another part of me, however, is dying to get to know him better. I have been struggling with these mixed feelings for some time now, but today, I am afraid, I might have given myself away. Late in the afternoon, I took out the Quran hanging on the wall, determined to study it on my own. In the past, Rumi and I had always followed the order in which the verses were handed down to us, but now that there was nobody guiding me and our lives had been turned topsy-turvy, I saw no harm in reading without an order. So I haphazardly opened a page and put my finger on the first verse that came up. It turned out to be Al-Nisa, the one verse in the whole book that has troubled me the most. With its unpromising teachings on women, I found the Nisa hard to understand and harder to accept. As I stood there reading the verse one more time, it occurred to me to ask for help. Rumi might be skipping our lessons, but there was no reason I couldn't ask him questions. So I grabbed my Quran and went to his room. To my surprise, instead of Rumi I found Shams there, sitting by the window with a rosary in his hand, the dying light of the setting sun caressing his face. He looked so handsome I had to avert my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I was looking for Maulana. I'll come later." "Why the rush? Stay," Shams said. "You seem to have come here to ask something. Perhaps I could be of help." I saw no reason not to share it with him. "Well, there is this verse in the Quran that I find a bit hard to understand," I said tentatively. Shams murmured, as if talking to himself, "The Quran is like a shy bride. She'll open her veil only if she sees that the onlooker is soft and compassionate at heart." Then he squared his shoulders and asked, "Which verse is it?" "Al-Nisa," I said. "There are some parts in it where men are said to be superior to women. It even says men can beat their wives." "Is that so?" Shams asked with such exaggerated interest that I couldn't be sure whether he was serious or teasing me. After a momentary silence, he broke into a soft smile and out of memory recited the verse. "Men are the maintainers of women because Allah has made some of them to excel others and because they spend out of their property. The good women are therefore obedient, guarding the unseen as Allah has guarded, and as to those on whose part you fear desertion, admonish them, and leave them alone in the sleeping places and beat them, then if they obey you, do not seek a way against them, surely Allah is high, great." When he finished, Shams closed his eyes and recited the same verse, this time in a different translation. "Men are the support of women as God gives some more means than others, and because they spend of their wealth to provide for them. So women who are virtuous are obedient to God and guard the hidden as God has guarded it. As for women you feel are averse, talk to them suasively, then leave them alone in bed without molesting them and go to bed with them when they are willing. If they open out to you, do not seek an excuse for blaming them. Surely God is sublime and great. Do you see any difference between the two? Shams asked. Yes, I do, I said. Their whole texture is different. The former sounds as if it gives consent to married men to beat their wives, whereas the latter advises them to simply walk away. I think that is a big difference. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Shams echoed several times, as if enjoying the question. Tell me something, Kaimaya. Have you ever gone swimming in a river? I nodded as a childhood memory returned to me. The cold, thirst-quenching streams of the Taurus Mountains crossed my mind. Of the younger girl who had spent many happy afternoons in those streams with her sister and her friends, there was now little left behind. I turned my face away as I didn't want Shams to see the tears in my eyes. When you look at a river from a distance, Kaimaya, you might think there is only one watercourse. But if you dive into the water, you'll realize there is more than one river. The river conceals various currents, all of them flowing in harmony and yet completely separate from one another. Upon saying that, Shams of Tabriz approached me and held my chin between his two fingers, forcing me to look directly into his deep, dark, soulful eyes. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't even breathe. The Kuran is a gushing river, he said. Those who look at it from a distance see only one river. But for those swimming in it, there are 4 currents. Like different types of fish, some of us swim closer to the surface while some others swim in deep waters down below. I'm afraid I don't understand, I said, although I was beginning to. Those who like to swim close to the surface are content with the outer meaning of the Quran. Many people are like that. They take the verses too literally. No wonder when they read a verse like the Nisa, they arrive at the conclusion that men are held superior to women. Because that is exactly what they want to see. How about the other currents? I asked. Shams sighed softly, and I couldn't help noticing his mouth, as mysterious and inviting as a secret garden. There are 3 more currents. The second one is deeper than the first, but still close to the surface. As your awareness expands, so does your grasp of the Quran. But for that to happen, you need to take the plunge. Listening to him, I felt both empty and fulfilled at the same time. What happens when you take the plunge? I asked cautiously. The third undercurrent is the esoteric, Batani, reading. If you read the Nisa with your inner eye open, you'll see that the verse is not about women and men but about womanhood and manhood. And each and every one of us, including you and me, has both femininity and masculinity in us, in varying degrees and shades. Only when we learn to embrace both can we attain harmonious oneness. Are you telling me that I have manliness inside me? Oh, yes, definitely. And I have a female side, too. I couldn't help but chuckle. And Rumi, how about him? Shams smiled fleetingly. Every man has a degree of womanliness inside. Even the ones who are manly men, especially those, my dear, Shams said, garnishing his words with a wink and dropping his voice to a whisper, as if sharing a secret. I stifled a giggle, feeling like a little girl. That was the impact of having Shams so close. He was a strange man, his voice oddly charming, his hands lithe and muscular, and his stare like a crease of sunlight, making everything that it fell upon look more intense and alive. Next to him I felt my youth in all its fullness, and yet somewhere inside me a maternal instinct sprawled, exuding the thick, milky scent of motherhood. I wanted to protect him. How or from what, I could not tell. Shams put his hand on my shoulder, his face so close to mine that I could feel the warmth of his breath. There was now a new, dreamy gaze to his eyes. He held me captive with his touch, caressing my cheeks, his fingertips as warm as a flame against my skin. I was flabbergasted. Now his finger moved down, reaching my bottom lip. Baffled and giddy, I closed my eyes, feeling a lifetime's worth of excitement welling up in my stomach. But no sooner had he touched my lips than Shams drew his hand back. "You should go now, dear Kaimaya," Shams murmured, making my name sound like a sad word. I walked out, my head dizzy and my cheeks flushed. Only after I went to my room, reclined on my back on the sleeping mat, and stared up at the ceiling, wondering how it would feel to be kissed by Shams, did it dawn upon me that I had forgotten to ask him about the fourth undercurrent in the stream, the deeper reading of the Quran. What was it? How could one ever achieve that kind of depth, and what happened to those who took the plunge? Sultan wailed. Konya, September 4, 1245. Being his older brother, I have always worried for Aladdin, but never as much as I do now. He has always had a quick temper, even as a toddler, but lately he is more quarrelsome and easily incensed, ready to squabble over almost anything, no matter how senseless or small. He is so petulant these days that even the children on the street take fright when they see him coming. Only 17, he has creases around his eyes from frowning and squinting too much. Just this morning I noticed a new wrinkle next to his mouth from holding it in a tight line all the time. I was busy writing on sheepskin parchment when I heard a faint rattling sound behind me. It was Aladdin, his lips set in a tense scowl. God knows how long he had been standing there like that, watching me with a strained look in his brown eyes. He asked me what I was doing. "I'm copying an old lecture of our Father's," I said. "It's good to have an extra copy of every one of them." "What's the use of it?" Aladdin exhaled loudly. "Father has stopped giving lectures or sermons. In case you haven't noticed, he doesn't teach at the madrasa either. Don't you see he has thrust aside all his responsibilities?" "This is a temporary situation," I said. "He'll soon start teaching again. You are only fooling yourself. Don't you see that our father doesn't have time for anything or anyone other than Shams? Isn't that funny? The man is supposed to be a wandering dervish, but he has taken root in our house." Aladdin emitted a chuckle, waiting for me to agree with him, but when I said nothing, he started pacing the room. Even without looking at him, I could feel the angry blaze in his eyes. "People are gossiping," Aladdin went on morosely. "They are all asking the same question: how can a respected scholar let himself be manipulated by a heretic? Our father's reputation is like ice melting under the sun. If he doesn't get a hold of himself soon, he might never be able to find students again in this town. Nobody would want him as a teacher. And I wouldn't blame them." I placed the parchment aside and looked at my brother. He was only a boy, really, although his every gesture and expression said he felt on the edge of manhood. He had changed a lot since last year, and I was beginning to suspect he could be in love. Just who the girl could be, I didn't know, and his close friends wouldn't tell me. "Brother, I realize you don't like Shams, but he is a guest in our house and we ought to respect him. Don't listen to what others say. Honestly, we shouldn't make a mountain out of a molehill." As soon as these words came from my mouth, I regretted my patronizing tone. But it was too late. Like bone-dry wood, Aladdin easily catches fire. "A molehill?" Aladdin snorted. "Is that what you call this calamity that has befallen us? How can you be so blind?" I took out another parchment, caressing its delicate surface. It always gave me tremendous pleasure to reproduce my father's words and to think that in doing so I was helping them to last longer. Even after 100 years passed, people could read my father's teachings and be inspired by them. To play a role in this transmission, however small a role it might be, made me proud. Still complaining, Aladdin stood next to me and glanced at my work, his eyes brooding and bitter. For a fleeting moment, I saw a longing in his eyes and recognized the face of a boy in need of his father's love. With a plunging heart, I realized it wasn't Shams he was truly angry at. It was my father. Aladdin was angry at my father for not loving him enough and for being who he was. My father could be distinguished and famous, but he had also been utterly helpless in the face of the death that had taken our mother at such a tender age. They say Shams put a spell on our father, Aladdin said. They say he was sent by the assassins. The assassins? I protested. That is nonsense. The assassins were a sect famous for their meticulous killing methods and extensive use of poisonous substances. Targeting influential people, they murdered their victims in public, so as to plant fear and panic in people's hearts. They had gone as far as leaving a poisoned cake in Saladin's tent with a note that said, "You are in our hands." And Saladin, this great commandeer of Islam who had fought bravely against the Christian crusaders and recaptured Jerusalem, had not dared to fight against the assassins, preferring to make peace with them. How could people think Shams could be linked with this sect of terror? I put my hand on Aladdin's shoulder and forced him to look at me. Besides, don't you know the sect is not what it used to be? They are barely more than a name now. Aladdin briefly considered this possibility. Yes, but they say there were 3 very loyal commandeers of Hassan Sabah. They left the castle of Alamut, pledging to spread terror and trouble wherever they went. People suspect that Shams is their leader. I was starting to lose patience. God help me. And could you please tell me why a Hashashin would want to kill our father? Because they hate influential people and love to create chaos, that's why, Aladdin responded. So agitated was he by his conspiracy theories that red blotches had formed on his cheeks. I knew I had to handle this more carefully. Look, people say all sorts of things all the time, I said. You can't take these awful rumors seriously. Clear your mind of spiteful thoughts. They are poisoning you. Aladdin groaned resentfully, but I continued nonetheless. You might not like Shams personally. You do not have to. But for father's sake you ought to show him some respect. Aladdin looked at me with bitterness and contempt. I understood that my younger brother was not only cross with our father and infuriated at Shams. He was also disappointed in me. He saw my appreciation of Shams as a sign of weakness. Perhaps he thought that in order to earn my father's favor, I was being subservient and spineless. It was only a suspicion on my part, but one that hurt me deeply. Still, I could not get angry at him, and even if I did, my anger would not last very long. He was my little brother. To me he would always be that boy running after street cats, getting his feet dirty in rain puddles, and nibbling slices of bread topped with yogurt all day long. I couldn't help seeing in his face the boy he once had been, a bit on the plump side and a tad short for his age, the boy who took the news of the death of his mother without shedding a tear. All he did was to look down at his feet as if suddenly ashamed of his shoes and purse his bottom lip until its color was gone. Neither a word nor a sob had come out of his mouth. I wish he would have cried. Do you remember the time you got into a fight with some neighboring kids? I asked. You came home crying, with a bloody nose. What did our mother tell you then? Aladdin's eyes first narrowed and then grew in recognition, but he didn't say anything. She told you that whenever you got angry with someone, you should replace the face of that person in your mind with the face of someone you love. Have you tried replacing Shams's face with our mother's face? Perhaps you could find something to like in him. A furtive smile, as swift and timid as a passing cloud, hovered over Aladdin's lips, and I was amazed at how much it softened his expression. Perhaps I could, he said, all anger draining out of his voice now. My heart melted. I gave my brother a hug, unsure of what else to say. As he hugged me back, I felt confident that he would repair his relationship with Shams and the harmony in our house would soon be restored. Given the course of events that followed, I couldn't have been more mistaken. Kara. Konya, October 22, 1245. Beyond the closed door, Shams and Rumi were talking fervently about God knows what the other day. I knocked and entered without waiting for a response, carrying a tray with a plate of halva. Normally Shams doesn't say anything when I am around, as if my presence forces him into silence. And he never comments upon my cooking skills. He eats very little anyhow. Sometimes I have the impression it makes no difference to him whether I serve a fabulous dinner or dry bread. But this time as soon as he took a bite from my halva, his eyes lit up. "This is delicious, Kara. How did you make it?" he asked. I don't know what came over me. Instead of seeing the compliment for what it was, I heard myself retort, "Why are you asking? Even if I told you how, you couldn't make it." Shams locked a level gaze into my eyes and nodded slightly, as if he agreed with what I said. I waited for him to say something in return, but he just stood there, mute and calm. In a little while, I left the room and returned to the kitchen, thinking the incident was left behind, and I probably would not have remembered it again, had it not been for what transpired this morning. I was churning butter by the hearth in the kitchen when I heard strange voices out in the courtyard. I rushed outside, only to witness the craziest scene ever. There were books every place, piled up in rickety towers, and still more books floating inside the fountain. From all the ink dissolving in it, the water in the fountain had turned a vivid blue. With Rumi standing right there, Shams picked a book from the pile, the collected poems of Al-Mutanabi, eyed it with a grim expression, and tossed it into the water. No sooner had the book submerged than he reached for another. This time it was Adder's The Book of Secrets. I gasped in horror. One by one, he was destroying Rumi's favorite books. The next to be hurled into the water was the Divine Sciences by Rumi's father. Knowing how much Rumi adored his father and doted upon this old manuscript, I looked at him, expecting him to throw a fit. Instead I found Rumi standing aside, his face pale as wax, his hands trembling. I couldn't understand for the life of me why he didn't say anything. The man who once had reprimanded me for just dusting his books was now watching a lunatic destroy his entire library, and yet he didn't even utter a word. It wasn't fair. If Rumi wasn't going to intervene, I would. "What are you doing?" I asked Shams. "These books have no other copies. They are very valuable. Why are you throwing them into the water? Have you lost your mind?" Instead of an answer, Shams cocked his head toward Rumi. "Is that what you think, too?" he asked. Rumi pursed his lips and smiled faintly but remained silent. "Why don't you say anything?" I yelled at my husband. At this, Rumi approached me and held my hand tightly. "Calm down, Kara, please. I trust in Shams." Giving me a glance over his shoulder, relaxed and confident, Shams rolled up his sleeves and started to pull the books out of the water. To my amazement, every single book he took out was as dry as a bone. "Is this magic? How did you do that?" I asked. "But why are you asking?" Shams said. "Even if I told you how, you couldn't do it." Trembling with anger, choking back sobs, I ran to the kitchen, which has become my sanctuary these days. And there, amid pots and pans, stacks of herbs and spices, I sat down and cried my heart out. Rumi. Konya, December 1245. Bent on praying the morning prayer together in the open air, Shams and I left the house shortly after dawn. We rode our horses for a while, through meadows and valleys and across ice-cold streams, enjoying the breeze on our faces. Scarecrows in wheat fields greeted us with an eerie poise, and newly washed clothes in front of a farmhouse fluttered madly in the breeze as we passed by, pointing in all directions into the semi-darkness. On the way back, Shams pulled at the reins of his horse and pointed to a massive oak tree outside the town. Together we sat under the tree, the sky hanging above our heads in shades of purple. Shams placed his cloak on the ground, and as calls to prayer echoed from mosques near and far, we prayed there together. When I first came to Konya, I sat under this tree, Shams said. He smiled at a distant memory, but then grew pensive and said, "A peasant gave me a ride. He was a great admirer of yours. He told me your sermons cured sadness. They used to call me the Wizard of Words," I said. "But it all feels so far away now. I don't want to give sermons anymore. I feel like I am done." "You are the Wizard of Words," Shams said determinedly. "But instead of a preaching mind, you have a chanting heart now." I didn't know what he meant by that, and I didn't ask. The dawn had erased what remained of the night before, turning the sky into a blameless orange. Far ahead of us, the town was waking up. Crows were diving into vegetable gardens to peck at whatever they could steal, doors were screeching, donkeys braying, and stoves burning as everyone got ready for a brand new day. People everywhere are struggling on their own for fulfillment, but without any guidance as to how to achieve it, murmured Shams with a shake of his head. "Your words help them. And I'll do everything in my power to help you. I am your servant." "Don't say that," I protested. "You are my friend." Oblivious to my objection, Shams continued. "My only concern is the shell you have been living in. As a famous preacher, you have been surrounded by fawning admirers. But how well do you know common people, drunks, beggars, thieves, prostitutes, gamblers, the most inconsolable and the most downtrodden? Can we love all of God's creatures? It is a difficult test, and one that only a few can pass." As he kept speaking, I saw gentleness and concern in his face, and something else that looked almost like maternal compassion. "You are right," I conceded. "I have always lived a protected life. I don't even know how ordinary people live." Shams picked up a lump of soil, and as he crumbled it between his fingers, he added softly, "If we can embrace the universe as a whole, with all its differences and contradictions, everything will melt into one." With this, Shams picked up a dead branch and drew a large circle around the oak tree. When he was done, he raised his arms toward the sky, as if wishing to be pulled up by an invisible rope, and uttered the 99 names of God. At the same time, he began to whirl inside the circle, first slowly and tenderly but then accelerating steadily, like a late afternoon breeze. Soon he was whirling with the speed and might of gusty winds. So captivating was his frenzy that I couldn't help but feel as if the whole universe, the earth, the stars, and the moon spun with him. I watched this most unusual dance, letting the energy it radiated envelop my soul and body. Finally Shams slowed down to a halt, his chest rising and falling with every ragged breath, his face white, his voice suddenly deep, as if coming from a distant place. "The universe is one being. Everything and everyone is interconnected through an invisible web of stories. Whether we are aware of it or not, we are all in a silent conversation. Do no harm. Practice compassion. And do not gossip behind anyone's back, not even a seemingly innocent remark. The words that come out of our mouths do not vanish but are perpetually stored in infinite space, and they will come back to us in due time. One man's pain will hurt us all. One man's joy will make everyone smile," he murmured. "This is what one of the 40 rules reminds us." Then he turned his inquisitive gaze to me. There was a shadow of despair in the bottomless depths of his eyes, a wave of sorrow that I had never seen in him before. "One day you will be known as the voice of love," Shams remarked. East and West, people who have never seen your face will be inspired by your voice. How is that going to happen? I asked incredulously. Through your words, Shams answered. But I am not talking about lectures or sermons. I am talking about poetry. Poetry, my voice cracked. I don't write poetry. I am a scholar. This elicited a subtle smile from Shams. You, my friend, are one of the finest poets the world will ever come to know. I was about to protest, but the determined look in Shams' eyes stopped me. Besides, I didn't feel like arguing. Even so, whatever needs to be done, we will do it together. We will walk on this path together. Shams nodded absently and lapsed into an eerie silence, gazing at the fading colors in the horizon. When he finally spoke, he uttered those ominous words that have never left me, scarring my soul permanently. As much as I would love to join you, I'm afraid you will have to do it alone. What do you mean? Where are you going? I asked. With a wistful pucker of the lips, Shams lowered his gaze. It is not in my hands. A sudden wind blew in our direction, and the weather turned chilly, as if warning us that the fall would soon be over. It began to rain out of the clear blue sky, in light, warm drops, as faint and delicate as the touch of butterflies. And that was the first time the thought of Shams' leaving me hit me like a sharp pain in the chest. Sultan wailed. Kanya, December 1245. Banter to some, but it pains me to hear the gossip. How can people be so disdainful and scornful with regard to things they know so little about? It is queer, if not frightening, how out of touch with truth people are. They don't understand the depth of the bond between my father and Shams. Apparently they haven't read the Quran. Because if they had, they would know that there are similar stories of spiritual companionship, such as the story of Moses and Khidr. It is in the verse Al-Kahf, clear and plain. Moses was an exemplary man, great enough to become a prophet someday, as well as a legendary commander and lawmaker. But there was a time when he sorely needed a spiritual companion to open his third eye. And that companion was no other than Khidr, the comforter of the distressed and dejected. Khidr said to Moses, I am a lifelong traveler. God has assigned me to roam the world and do what needs to be done. You say you want to join me in my journeys, but if you follow me, you must not question anything I do. Can you bear to accompany me without questioning? Can you trust me fully? Yes, I can, Moses assured him. Let me come with you. I promise, I won't ask you any questions. So they set out on the road, visiting various towns on the way. But when he witnessed Khidr perform senseless actions, like killing a young boy or sinking a boat, Moses could not hold his tongue. Why did you do those awful things? He asked desperately. What happened to your promise? Khidr asked back. Did I not tell you that you can ask me no questions? Each time Moses apologized, promising not to ask anything, and each time he broke his promise. In the end, Khidr explained the reason behind each and every one of his actions. Slowly but surely, Moses understood that things that can seem malicious or unfortunate are often a blessing in disguise, whereas things that might seem pleasant can be harmful in the long run. His brief companionship with Khidr was to be the most eye-opening experience in his life. As in this parable, there are friendships in this world that seem incomprehensible to ordinary people but are in fact conduits to deeper wisdom and insight. This is how I regard Shams' presence in my father's life. But I know that other people don't see it in the same way, and I am worried. Unfortunately, Shams does not make it easy for people to like him. Sitting at the gate of the seminary in an embarrassingly tyrannical manner, he stops and interrogates everyone who wants to go in to talk to my father. What do you want to see the great Maulana for? He asks. What did you bring as a gift? Not knowing what to say, people stammer and falter, even apologize. And Shams sends them away. Some of these visitors return in a few days with presents, carrying dried fruits, silver dirhams, silk carpets, or newborn lambs. But seeing these goods annoys Shams even more. His black eyes aglow, his face glittering with fervor, he chases them away again. One day a man got so upset with Shams he shouted, "What gives you the right to block Maulana's door? You keep asking everyone what they are bringing. How about you? What did you bring him?" "I brought myself," Shams said, just loud enough to be heard. "I sacrificed my head for him." The man trudged off, mumbling something under his breath, looking more confused than enraged. The same day I asked Shams if it didn't trouble him that he was so widely misunderstood and underappreciated. Scarcely able to contain my apprehension, I pointed out that he had gained many enemies lately. Shams looked at me blankly, as if he had no idea what I was talking about. "But I have no enemies," he said with a shrug. "The lovers of God can have critics and even rivals, but they cannot have enemies." "Yes, but you quarrel with people," I objected. Shams bristled with fervor. "I don't quarrel with them, I quarrel with their ego. That's different." Then he added softly, "It is one of the 40 rules, this world is like a snowy mountain that echoes. Your voice, whatever you speak, good or evil, will somehow come back to you. Therefore, if there is someone who harbors ill thoughts about you, saying similarly bad things about him will only make matters worse. You will be locked in a vicious circle of malevolent energy. Instead, for 40 days and nights say and think nice things about that person. Everything will be different at the end of 40 days, because you will be different inside. But people are saying all sorts of things about you. They even say for two men to be so fond of each other there has to be an unspeakable bond between them," I said, my voice failing me toward the end. Upon hearing this, Shams put his hand on my arm and smiled his usual calming smile. He then told me a story. Two men were traveling from one town to another. They came to a stream that had risen due to heavy rainfall. Just when they were about to cross the water, they noticed a young, beautiful woman standing there all alone, in need of help. One of the men immediately went to her side. He picked the woman up and carried her in his arms across the stream. Then he dropped her there, waved goodbye, and the two men went their way. During the rest of the trip, the second traveler was unusually silent and sullen, not responding to his friend's questions. After several hours of sulking, unable to keep silent anymore, he said, "Why did you touch that woman? She could have seduced you. Men and women cannot come into contact like that." The first man responded calmly, "My friend, I carried the woman across the stream, and that is where I left her. It is you who have been carrying her ever since." "Some people are like that," Shams said. "They carry their own